Hello there, welcome to our new class on JavaScript. In today's class, we are going to introduce ourselves to JavaScript. JavaScript is um, a client-side scripting language, a very powerful language for enhancing the web. The JavaScript language is an interpreter whose engine is already embedded in every browser. So there are some few things I'm gonna be talking about today in this um, class. So to run your JavaScript codes, you don't need to install a third-party interpreter, because the interpreter is already embedded in your browser. So for example, if you look at your browser, there are things that, for example, to run JavaScript on your browser, you can simply go to developer, and then you turn on the developers tool. So if you look at this place, the console, pretty much you can start running your JavaScript code here. For example, you say variable a is equals to 3, or for example you say a is equals to 3 is equals to 2, b should be equals to 5. These are all JavaScript. A plus b, you can see, gives me 7. So these are JavaScript code, right? And I'm running it directly on my browser. Why? Because the JavaScript interpreter is already embedded on every browser. Now, JavaScript is a scripting language, and so its major function is to enhance your web application. For example, you have a JavaScript, you have a website. You can use JavaScript to do a lot of things on the website. For example, animation, font controls, slider, so many things that JavaScript is so powerful. Even technologies like XHR, you can use JavaScript to query your server when you are trying to create single page applications, where you simply query the server, send request, such as post request, get request, delete, and the rest, fetch data, and things like that. Okay, so to get started with JavaScript, you don't need to install any application. You just need to open your editor as you are used to, and then you open for example, okay, let's open a new window. There you go. So just like the way you know a HTML file has an extension of .html, likewise a JavaScript file has an extension of .js. But then, just like you know of CSS, you could embed your CSS code inside the web page, right? Again, with your JavaScript code, you can as well embed your JS codes inside your HTML page. JavaScript can also be loaded from the server, just as a CSS file can as well be loaded from the server. Now this is a typical JavaScript file. And just as you know in HTML, when you want to add a CSS file to your web page, you use the link tag. Okay, so I'm gonna open my project, our Deliverman project now. I'm gonna add it to my editor. So for example, I have this .js file here, and I want to use this JS file in my home page, for example here. So again, as I explained, there are two ways you can add your JavaScript code to your web page. Is either you are using the script tag, like this script tag, to add your JavaScript file, or you are using the script tag to add the code directly inside the browser. For example, I can do this, say script, like this. Then instead of having the src property, I'll just open the script tag, like opening and closing tag, and then I add my JavaScript code to in this place. Say okay, variable a is equals to 2, variable b is equals to 5, variable c is equals to a plus b. Then I say console.log c. Now console.log simply writes this variable here, right, to the console of my browser. So I'll show you that soon. Now what I'm explaining here is that this is an internal method of adding my JavaScript code to my web page. I can as well have this code saved in a JavaScript file like this. Oh, sorry for that. And then I can add that JavaScript file to my web page using the src property in the script tag. Say src is equals to index.js. In this case, my index.js is gonna look for this my index.html is gonna look for this index.js here and then load it on the browser, so that the functions or the code that is contained here will now be available to the web page. Okay, so I'm gonna do this comment this code out. What this means is that it's not more running. So then next I'm gonna open my Deliverman project. I'm gonna launch my index.html this way. Then I'm gonna separate these guys from these guys here, like this. So I'm gonna open the console for you to see if I have my variable c written on the console. Again, to open your console, you simply go to menu here. Now go to developer, and then you click on developers tool. A quick shortcut to your console is Ctrl+Shift+I. So pressing Ctrl+Shift+I opens and closes the console. Okay, so this is my home page. I'm expecting to see 5. So it's have an error here. Say file. This file not found. Okay, so there have been a problem, because I have my index.js in a folder called js. So again, just like CSS, we're supposed to have the name of the folder before the name of the file like this. So we say js/index.js. Since the folder name is js and then the file name is index.js. So that was the error in the addressing. And so now it should be found as 7. So you can see this. So this line of code simply writes to the console. So you can see that with this we have written to the console. Again, I'm gonna comment this guy out now. I'm gonna comment this guy out, and then I'm gonna open this guy. Again, the same thing, no changes, except that the first one comes from an index.html index.js, while this comes from index.html. Now, if you look at this console, you realize that it's telling you the source of this console here, this output, and it's giving you the exact line where you are gonna find that. So what this is telling me is that if I go to my web page on line 15, I'm gonna see the console statement that produce this output. Again, if I comment this guy out and I uncomment this guy, refresh it, again, if you look at this, it's telling me the source of the console as index.js on line 4. So if I go to index.js exactly on line 4, I'm gonna find this. Now, JavaScript has been in existence for a very long time, and it has evolved from versions to versions, from versions to versions. Currently, JavaScript is on, I think, versions E6 or so. Okay, so we're gonna be using the popular W3 CSS tutorial, JavaScript tutorial in this course. The tutorial is, I recommend this tutorial because it's simple, easy, and straightforward. So if you look at the topics have been well, arranged from the most important. So now, if you look at this, we're going to be looking at the JavaScript output. So the JavaScript output simply brings to us the possibilities of, putting data out there through our browser. For example, if you look at this, we'll talk about the console, how you can, send information to the console. There are other ways you can also, output data. For example, you can have an alert box, which is the windows.alert. Now, instead of sending this output to our console, we could as well say window.alert, and then we put our output there. Now, what this does is that it automatically creates a pop-up on our web page for us, which is an alert popping up the variable that we have supplied. For example, you can see that 7. So when you use an alert, it tends to pop up, and so therefore halting the execution or the loading of that page until the alert box has been disposed. So you can see that. We can also output to using document.write, and the most interesting, so for example, we can say document.write, and then we put in our variable again, C, and then it's gonna write it to our document here. You can see that. And the most interesting one is the writing to an element, which is the most powerful aspect of JavaScript. JavaScript has a lot of functions, so you could write to an element, so you could change, the content of a div dynamically using JavaScript. You could change attributes of an element. For example, you can choose to switch off and switch on, display show, change the size of elements, change their background, change their color, and so many things you can do with JavaScript. So we're going to be looking at, for example, to write to an element, the first thing you need to do is to have a reference to that element. Okay, for example, if you look at this element that says contact, to have a reference to this, I could use an ID. Say ID is equals to maybe contact. And so if I can reference this element using the ID, then I can use the inner HTML to output to it. For example, I can now say document.get element by ID. Then that ID that was supplied, I supply it here. Then I now say .inner HTML should be equals to C. So what happened? This element here is referenced using the ID, and then the content of the element is changed to what? To C. Inner HTML. So inner HTML reference the content of what? Of the element. So currently the content is contact, and so if I refresh the page now, the content will be changed from contact to what? To 7. Okay, so now remember that JavaScript is an interpreter, and as you know, interpreters execute their code line by line. So what's happening here is that the moment we load this index.js, it begins to interpret the code line by line, line by line. So at this point where this code is executed, this part of the code has not been loaded, so it doesn't see this guy here. Now to solve this, I simply move this script tag from here to the bottom of the page, telling the page to only execute this script tag after the entire page has been loaded. So doing that, you realize that the page is loaded and then the script tag is executed, and so therefore the contact can be referenced now, right? You can see that the content of the contact button has changed from contact to 7. This is done by JavaScript. You could change the images, a lot of things as the browser, as the user is interfacing with the website. Okay, so this brings us to an introduction to JavaScript. See you in the next class.